Red Dead Redemption 2 stands among the greatest stories ever told in gaming, but at its core lies a great character who harbors one major flaw that is often overlooked. The result is a troubled gunslinger who spins his wheels for far too long.
Forgive me, but that's the problem. You don't know you.
What do you mean?
Let's be clear up front. Arthur Morgan is an S-class protagonist. He's no John Marston, but his character and redemption arc are among the best in gaming. Fair enough? Good. The problem with Arthur is that he's a passive character. This causes most of his early actions to be routine and without purpose. A character is what they do. What a character wants reveals who they are. With Arthur, it feels like only the second half of that equation comes through in 2/3 of his multi-chaptered story. Now, there are no rules in creating the perfect protagonist, but making your character passive is like riding shotgun in your own car. If they're not motivated to act independently, they risk becoming a passenger in a story where events sort of just happen to them. In other words, they become reactive. Without the hero taking deliberate action based on internal desires, writers are forced to rely on the hero's personality to define them. Luckily, Roger Clark's award-worthy performance is up to the task, but Arthur's passive problem remains, lingering on in the background. When we're introduced to Arthur, his flaw is his loyalty. Despite Dutch's questionable confidence, Arthur remains a team player. It's obvious from Arthur's many Jim Halpert reactions that he's skeptical of Dutch's plan, but those feelings are never acted upon. As Dutch's efforts continue to unravel and deteriorate not only his mind but his camp, Arthur largely refuses to take a stand. He's given several opportunities to act independently, but the results often end like this.
But we need seed capital, and we need to leave. You know it. I know it.
Forgive me if I can't think too much about the mango harvest.
This is it. Trust me. Arthur.
If it's business, well, business is business.
Despite his internal hesitancy, Arthur is always down to ride, remaining neutral well beyond the point of believability. Even loyalty isn't beyond reason. This keeps Arthur's growth as a character in constant stasis for most of his story. Passivity in a character doesn't mean no action. Arthur goes on several missions, robs banks, and gets into chaotic shootouts. A passive character in story means they don't demonstrate free will and take meaningful action in response to external conflict. They just go with the flow. It's fine to make Arthur a passive hero, but it only works for so long. A gunslinger who never puts his foot down becomes complacent. Arthur's story is a redemption arc. Therefore, he needs to take regular, decisive action that illustrates growth and change in his character. Arthur does eventually become an active protagonist, but only in the final chapter of his story, and the cause has everything to do with his biggest moment of crisis.
What is it?
It's not good news.
I guess that.
You got tuberculosis. I'm really sorry for you, son. It's a hell of a thing.
What do you mean?
You're real sick.
Change arcs need an inciting incident to push a passive character into action. This scene achieves that perfectly. Arthur is more compelling after his diagnosis because he's given internal motivation he didn't have in the 5 previous chapters. Because Arthur is hyper-aware of his mortality, he stops being passive and becomes active, forcing him to pursue meaningful change. If you think about it, all of Arthur's best moments happen in the final chapter, the part where he is the most active as a protagonist. The issue with Arthur's diagnosis appearing so late in the story is that it forces the character to remain stagnant for several hours. Because the character remains passive for so long, his redemption in the final chapter feels like it happens at the drop of a hat. One minute Arthur's going along with Dutch's plan, even though folks are losing faith in him. The next he's on a fast track to redemption. None of it feels gradual. Arthur's skepticism of Dutch's plan is obvious, but until the end, we never see any acts of defiance that illustrate those internal feelings. Personally, I feel the tuberculosis scene happens way too late in the game. It would have been much more effective a couple of chapters in. If Arthur had been aware of his TB when his cough first starts, it would have put him back in the driver's seat, giving him purpose. It would force Arthur to be more defiant of Dutch while still being a victim of his own loyalty. As his condition worsens, the scales tip. We would see a character who wants a life with a lost love, but it would be due to his lurking illness that he'd see it as doomed.
Run away with me, Arthur. Run away right now and don't look back.
I want to. More than anything, I want to.
A subplot like Mary's would be more than about Arthur's loyalty to his gang, but a multi-layered dilemma adding more stakes to each scene. Arthur's journey through the East would be an outlaw absorbing every aspect of his world like it's his last, because he knows it will be. Morgan's redemption would feel more like a gradual progression instead of being crammed into one chapter. The story could even create pockets of false hope, like when Arthur meets Rainsfall and is given herbs that temporarily curb his symptoms. Arthur's passivity doesn't ruin his character. Because the story does so many things right, this flaw becomes minor in the grand scheme. Roger Clark's performance adds the dimension that seems to be missing from Arthur Morgan on paper. Still, it's worth imagining a version of the story where Arthur Morgan has to come to grips with his mortality earlier on. It would have made for an even more compelling character overall. A gunslinger caught between loyalty to his gang and an illness that slowly eats away at him. What's not to love? In the end, we're left with a charismatic cowboy whose potential is partially hindered by a creative choice to make him passive. While it doesn't diminish the amazing outlaw we know, it's a shame we didn't see an Arthur who grabbed the reins more often.